I love that truck stop. It's the best job I've ever had. Not so much for the work, although I was an excellent dishwasher, but it's for who I became during that time in my life. I had to deal with myself that I'd leave my messy life outside the truck stop, and when I went in, I'd just be as professional as I could and take care of business. Well, on this particular day, my two worlds collided. And before I knew it, I heard a loud voice behind me. "Why are you crying?" As I was wiping my tears away, I was angry at myself for getting caught. My boss, Steve, was built like a fire hydrant, very intimidating guy, a man of few words, said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I'm not crying." He said, "Come with me, Sean." It wasn't an invitation. He really wanted me to follow. I followed Steve out to what we nicknamed his office. It was the worst booth in the truck stop. The toilet door literally hit the seat every time a guy walked out, and he worked out of that little booth, had his papers there, and I sat across from him, and he asked me one more time, this time in a gentle voice. He said, "Why are you crying?" And then the floodgates opened. I said, they call me names all the time, and they've predicted my future. They say that I'm going to be a laborer or a dishwasher for the rest of my life. And Steve clenched his fist. I wasn't sure if he was mad at me or them. And he said, "Sean, listen, you're old enough now, you've got to take control of your mind before someone does it for you for the rest of your life." He told me a little bit about his story. Steve came to Canada as an immigrant from Greece with a second grade education from Athens. He had $500 in his pocket and he didn't speak English. Steve said to me, "I got really lucky when I got here that my boss showed me the formula on how to be successful." And he said it's something they don't teach in school. He grabbed a napkin and started drawing on the napkin. He said, "I'm telling you, Sean, there's a formula for success. If you'd like, I'll teach it. If you're ready, I will teach you how to do this. And if you master it, anything's possible. You can acquire anything you set your mind to." In that moment, it was like a light going on in a room that was dark that I'd been fumbling in for years. I was truly excited, about what was about to happen. I was 12 years old, and my life would never be the same. I spent some time working in Toronto at bars. I worked at one of the busiest bars in Toronto. It was very sad when one of my managers told me he was leaving to go back to London. He was offered a job in consultancy. And I made Paul a promise that he'd keep in touch with me. And I said, if anything comes up anywhere, I'm in, right? My bag's packed, I'm ready to go. To my surprise, a few months later, I received a letter from him with a quick update, an invitation to come to London. His consulting firm was hiring entry-level positions. And he said, brace yourself, it's not that sexy. But he said, if you come across, I can get you an interview. That's all I needed to hear. I could barely keep it together, saying goodbye to my mom and dad at the airport. I was terrified. I'd only been on a plane once before. I had 1,000 pounds in my pocket. Everything I was bringing with me was in the overhead locker. I didn't even think to have a checked bag. And I was on my way. I made a deal with myself on that flight somewhere over the Atlantic that the old Sean was going to be left behind. And all the work that I had done, when I got off that plane, Sean 2.0 would arrive. To this day, Piccadilly Circus is one of my favorite places in the world. The first bar that I worked on was there. The black cabs, the red double-decker buses, everybody looked like they were out of a magazine, except me. I had an AC/DC t-shirt and acid wash jeans on. Looked like lost luggage with legs, just stuck out. But London would be my home for 6 years. Took 3 interviews to get the job. I was given a business card. It's my first business card. I was put on the openings team, and we were going to go around Europe and open bars for clients. As prestigious as field consultant sounds, what that really means is grunt work, photocopies, and running an awful lot of coffees for the senior people. I didn't report directly into Paul, but he checked in with me all the time. And 1 month in, he called me and said, "Hey, let's check in, see how things are going." And then he gave me a gift, which I thought was a very strange gift, a Sony Walkman, which for those of you old enough, you remember those, and a audio cassette tape called Maximum Achievement. I didn't know what it was about. I got out, put the headphones on, put the tape in. I walked around London for hours, mesmerized. I felt very much like someone had just given me a blueprint for how to be successful. I listened to that cassette series over and over. I literally wore the face off the cassette series. Every day I listened to that. A couple months later, actually every month, Paul checked in with me. So he said, let's go out to lunch. I said to Paul not long ago, I've never seen him eat anything but fish and chips. I don't know how a man lives on just fish and chips, but he loves them. And we sat down, and he asked me how the job was going. He asked me about maximum achievement. I couldn't wait to tell him all about it. And he said, well, Sean, there's something I really want to talk to you about today. And then he said 5 words to me that sent my entire world crashing down around me. He said, I know you can't read. I felt betrayed by him and paralyzed and was so angry that my old life had followed me across. I said, why would you say that, Paul? It's not true. He said, Sean, I see how you consume audible information, how you pick things up so quickly, but when it comes to the written word, it just washes over you. He said, I know you can't read. I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought everything that I had worked for was being taken away at this restaurant. And then Paul said to me, my brother also has a learning disability, a phrase I've really come to detest. And he said he worked with an adult learning center, and it changed his life. And he said, I want it for you, if you want it. So Paul offered to introduce me to the teacher that worked with his brother. Walking through those doors was the hardest thing I had done up to that point in my life. I had promised myself I would never be back in a school again. They ran several tests on me and let me know that I had double deficit dyslexia. So good news is something that you can overcome, you can work with. I put my head down and I did the work. I went 2 nights a week and then did the homework and kept going. I was 21 years old when I learned how to read. It was an amazing gift. The next 5 years of my life, I was a sponge. I got transferred from the openings team to the turnaround team that Paul was on. So they go in and work with distressed assets, typically acquire them, bundle them, turn them around, and move them forward. It was an amazing job for a guy my age. I absolutely loved it. So the experience was there. I made more money. I wasn't paid a ton, but I wasn't making much money back in Canada. So I made more money than I thought I ever would. And, it was just an amazing time in my life. I fell in love with travel. Over that time, I went to 27 countries, some for work and some for travel. I absolutely loved it, and I continue today. I've been to my 60th country recently. Lifelong passion. So things were going well. In my mind, I thought maybe too well. And I really felt like I was living someone else's life, right? I was following this formula, plugging in, doing what my bosses told me, working harder than everybody else. But in hindsight, I realized that was just my first brush with imposter syndrome. So after 6 years in London, I packed my bags, gave 3 months' notice, and I left. It was a very hard decision, but I went to Sydney, and Sydney for me was a blank canvas, right? Nobody knew me there. I wanted to take what I had learned and try things out on my own. And if I failed, well, who would know? It's an awfully long way from the little town I grew up in Canada. Things happened fast in Sydney, too fast. I printed some business cards and a 1-page flyer. I was knocking on doors of bars and restaurants that I could see that they were struggling. A very simple offer: no retainer, I'll pay you. You'll give me a percentage of the profit that I increase. Things went so well that I had to hire staff within 6 months, and I had my own little consulting firm. I'd lift off. While I was doing that work, I had this urge to have my own place and to start my own portfolio. So I followed my training. I knew how to buy businesses at a bankruptcy, and I bought my first one. I paid $1, plus I took on some debt. I was 27 years old. I had a consulting firm and my first bar, and the formula was working. I was doing it on my own. On the personal side, I got married, had my first 2 of 4 amazing kids. Things were good at that time. I grew the consultancy, and over the next 5 years, I acquired 7 more bars and restaurants. On paper, looked like I had great traction. In reality, it was acceleration without brakes. That's when the warning lights started flashing. The way I handled my stress was I drank my calories. My left hand always had something in it: 6 coffees in the morning, 6 Red Bulls in the afternoon, beer and wine to go to sleep at night. End result of that, I went from 200 pounds to 300 pounds really quickly. And wrote that off as a price of success, right? You must have to pay something to have all this money and things taken off the way that you are. That was my thinking. The trouble was, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel successful. I didn't recognize the person I was looking at. And I thought, this formula is really good for taking care of businesses, but I didn't feel it was taking care of me. I started to feel sick and down. But I did what the typical entrepreneur does. You just hit the accelerator, keep going, right? More money, more business, faster, more. Friends of mine, speaking of school, invited me to a university, Entrepreneurs Organization University. I said, school's not for me. I'd finished the Adult Learning Center, and I was done with all that. And they said, no, this is different. You got to come check this out. First session, I looked on the board, was 3 hours from the founder. Right? I said, I've not been able to I wasn't able to sit through 3 hours of childbirth, let alone a 3-hour session with some dude talking about business. Well, that dude sitting in the front row here today, Vern Harnish, was the speaker that morning, totally changed the way I saw business. Right? And I realized what can be accomplished in a few hours. Not long afterwards, I hired my first coach. I got more mentors for bigger, sexier goals, rapid acceleration. Things really started to take off. Then I started running red lights. I was at the doctor's office on a treadmill. As an ex-hockey player in Canada, I used to be in pretty good shape. Now I'm 300 pounds, gasping for air with chest pains. I surged forward and hit the red kill switch. I had just failed Keyman insurance test. No coverage offered to me that year anyways. But worse than that, the doctor sat me down and he said, Sean, I see guys like you come in here all the time. It doesn't end well. He said, you keep this up, you're not going to be at your kid's wedding. So I was 32 years old and thinking, am I going to make it to 42? Is this what my life looks like? So, big reset button. Sold the bar group. We were doing $33 million a year with almost 400 employees. Turned the consultancy into a franchise, which I'll come back to in a second, and sold everything and moved back to North America. What looked like a big reset, my geography changed, but my software was still the same, right? So I got to the States, and this is where things started to speed up a little bit for me. The American market was very different than the Australian market. Things happened quickly, and so did I. I get to the States, I decided I'd lose some weight. I lost 50 pounds in 12 weeks. Then I lost a further 20 pounds in the next 12 weeks. So check, my health's back in check. My consulting business, we were franchising it, the consulting business, I went from working with just bar groups to working with public companies. My biggest project, I wrote a project and rolled it out over the course of 6 years, and we went to 52 countries around the world with the biggest liquor supplier. And then the franchise business, we put that on steroids as well, 26 offices in 8 countries, right? Things were rolling. Well, you notice the pattern. I did nothing in moderation, right? More red lights, only this time they were on the other side of the road. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs can relate to migraines, panic attacks, just not feeling like yourself. 2 of my friends died that were really tangled up in their business, and it scared me. I was sad to lose them, and I went through a divorce, which was crippling, obviously not just for me, but for the whole family. People would ask me how I feel, and my answer was always numb. I just didn't feel anything at that time. I think I just turned off. So I went to a doctor and said, I need help. He cut me off early on into the piece and said, I can fix you. If any doctor, psychiatrist says to you, doesn't ask you about your diet, your stress load, or anything else, says, I can fix you, just run out of the office. So he hooked me up with a great cocktail, Adderall for the daytime, Ambien for the nighttime, and it was like a seesaw, up, down, up, down. It wasn't making me better. I was losing control. I felt that I was going to get exposed, so I started to extract myself from speaking gigs, consulting, board meetings. I had to get out. Truth is, I didn't trust myself anymore. There was one gig I couldn't cancel, and it was in Brazil. It was for 100 executives on a program that I wrote that ran over the course of 2 days. No one else could do it. I'd already postponed it once. My software said, everything you want's on the other side of that fire, right? But it turns out that sometimes there's just more fire on the other side of the fire. On the flight, I knew I was in real trouble. I had panic attacks before, but this was different. I was disoriented and terrified. My mind was cycling. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. The only place I felt safe was in the bathroom, and I sat in there for hours. The flight attendants tried to get me out. Eventually, a pilot informed me that if I was in there when the plane landed, I'd be taken off by the police. That got my attention. I was 44 years old, and I knew the wheels were coming off, and today was the day. I was approaching the border control, high anxiety, ran towards a rubbish bin. My body was revolting. I threw up, and there was blood down the side of the bin. I had just had something rupture inside of me, and I collapsed. I spent 2 days in the hospital. This was the price of success. But I convinced myself I just needed a long weekend. I need to get home, be with my dog on the dock, and fix myself. Well, that's when the dream happened. I was dreaming on the dock one day. I was dreaming on my second night being home. A couple friends stayed with me. And I was driving my car coming home from work just like I did every day, except this day I accelerated into this piling. And the minute I made impact, I felt this incredible release, this euphoric release. I felt no pain for the first time in a long time. I woke up, I was covered in sweat, my dog was barking, my two friends ran in and said, "What's going on?" And I explained what was happening, and they said, "Sean, that's not a dream, that's suicidal ideation." They said, "We're begging you to go to the hospital and get some help." So for the first time in my life, I surrendered. And I'm happy to say that the healing started almost immediately. Like the pressure off of just saying, I can't do this anymore, I need to go get some help. Wonderful facility just outside of Baltimore. Giving up your belt and shoelaces is a surreal experience, one I don't wish on anybody. But this began the best and worst 8 days of my life. Not much to do at the hospital except therapy. And the therapy was so basic. They're talking about how to sleep, how to set boundaries, how to say no. Group therapy, I kept looking around saying, who are they talking to? Who doesn't know this? They were talking to me. I'd forgotten all the things that a human needs to do to take care of themselves. So my last day there, on day 8, I was sitting on my bed, honestly afraid to go home. You're so protected in there. No phone vibrating. Don't have to worry about meals. You just sleep and think and talk. And this beautiful nurse comes over, who I had seen almost every day, and she sat down beside me, and she said, "Sean, what's the one thing that's going to change as a result of today, or your experience here?" There were 100 things in my head, but what came out of my mouth was, "I don't know." And she said, she put her hand on my knee, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, don't waste a perfectly good crisis." She said, "Pick your one thing, and the next one will become available to you." So my wish for all of you today is you don't need to have your own perfectly good crisis. You can borrow mine and start to upgrade your software starting tomorrow. Thank you.